I read an 850-page book, and I'll tell you how you can do that as well. So Hugo read an 850-page book. How did we even end up here? I was not intending to read this book, if I'm gonna be honest. The only reason I actually ended up buying this book was for 2 reasons. My boyfriend, he got me a gift card to Waterstones, and I saw this book in the bookstore, and I was like, wow, love the cover. And then I went to pick it up, and it was humongous. And then I went to my boyfriend and said, I am never gonna be able to finish this. And then he said, not with that attitude, and we all know I'm an Aries, so I was like, and then I bought the book. And this was something I did not regret. So this video is going to be divided into 2 sections. The first section is going to be focused on how you can learn to read longer books, and then I'm also going to be making a little book review of the book. So just jumping straight into it. Do not rush the book. You should not feel like you have to rush a book just because it's long and that's what people tell you to do. Obviously, is there benefits from trying to speed reading? Sure, but it can definitely put a lot of stress on you, and it's just going to take away the experience of reading books in general, and especially if it's a longer book, I really don't recommend you rush the book. You can easily read a book like this, just like any standard 350-page book. It is not that difficult, it is just longer. Obviously, there's a chance you don't like the book. That's completely fine. That has nothing to do with the length of the book. Maybe you just don't like the story. I definitely recommend, if you are reading a book that is more than 500 pages, that you definitely set a rule that you have to get to at least 100 pages before you give up on the book. I think that's really important when it comes to such a long book, because there's gonna be a lot more filler things. Just like if you've watched any longer show, there's gonna be a lot more depth to a story in comparison to if it was a shorter series. It's the exact same thing as a book, because in a longer book, there's going to be a lot more characters, and you're going to learn about a lot more things, and a lot of things are added that maybe not are like super important, maybe not in the moment, but they are important later in the book. Definitely make sure that you give it its well-loved and time before you give up on it. And yes, I am 100% aware that when you reach like the 700-page mark, you basically read 2 books already, but instead it's just 1. And that's okay. You need to want to read the book. Like, you're already on page 700, so you might as well finish the book. And then you can say you read 2 books in 1 book. And even though I think you don't have to rush the book, if you don't want it to feel dreadful, definitely make sure you read the book every single day. Maybe set a goal of maybe 50 pages a day, 25 pages a day, maybe even a chapter. I think a chapter is a really great idea, because if you know you're on chapter 50 and there is, I don't know, 100 chapters or something, you know you'll be done with the book in 50 days. That is one great thing you can do to make sure that you have like a rough timeline of when you'll be done with the book. But again, you should not rush the book. I don't think you should rush any book, in my opinion. I think rushing books is just gonna take away the enjoyment of reading books. Do not do that. I also do think a way you can do this is you can make a form of ritual out of it. Just like you have your standard morning routines and you have your standard night routines, you can make sure that before you get out of bed, you have to read at least a page of the book. You're probably not gonna read just a page, you're probably gonna read a chapter, or maybe even more depending on the mood or whatever you want. So you can always do that to ensure that you're gonna be reading the book every day and it's part of your natural routine. Of course, you can schedule this as a different time of day. You can maybe make at 3 p.m. when you get home from work that you have to lay in bed and read for at least 30 minutes or whatever might fit for you. So that's a great technique to get through the book. I definitely did this because, yes, I did enjoy the book, and this is one of the first 6-star books I've had in a really long time. I still think it was great, and I think it was fine that it was 800 pages in my opinion. 247 to be exact. And my next tip is you have to pick a genre you already know you're gonna love. The worst thing you can do is trying to read a book in a genre you don't like that is 800 pages long. Do not do this. I know you want to experiment with different genres of books, but this is definitely not the one. If this was like a romance book, I would have absolutely, no, it wouldn't have worked out because I don't like romance books that much. I don't mind when there's romance in the plot. There's like a teeny tiny bit of romance in this book, but it's definitely not the main focus on the book. There's like 2 characters that have a love story, like two young teenagers. This is not a spoiler to the book, I promise. It's really early you learn about this. It does add to the story, of course, but it didn't need it, to be honest. So of course, if this was a romance book, I would have probably stopped around like, I don't know, here. How many pages is that? 183. Probably not that long. But you get what I'm saying. Like, do not try and read a genre you don't like. Now, I know this is a thriller book and it's also slightly a horror book, but it's not like gory horror, because I generally don't like reading about gory horror. I used to be someone who really liked watching gory horror films, but I don't really like it anymore. But I do think like a good little thriller book is a good idea. So I know this is really counterintuitive, but I really don't recommend you read a book simply just because it is a popular book. Now, on one hand, I think there's a lot of benefits from reading a popular book that's long, but you shouldn't just read it because a lot of people like it and it's popular. Because again, if you don't like the genre of the book, you're not gonna like the book. Of course you can read a book that's popular. They're popular for a reason. I think a great example of this could be like The Lord of the Rings, which is 1,280 pages. Like, what the fuck? I could not sit through that many pages. I definitely could. I could, but I don't think it would have worked out great for me because I don't like the genre. I like the movies though. The movies are fantastic. I generally don't advise reading a book just because it's popular. In general, I don't recommend it because just because it's popular doesn't mean you're gonna like it, especially newer books, because of course the classics you're probably gonna like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. There's a high chance you're gonna like them because they're loved by so many people. But I definitely think with the new generation of like book talk and booktubers and stuff like that recommending just the same old boring romance book over and over again, you don't have to do that. So do not feel like you have to read a book simply just because it's popular. Now onto the second part of this video, my thoughts and opinions on this book. I already said a little bit of how I feel about this book, but let's just go more into depth. This book feels like I am watching the movie Coraline. And if you know me, you know I love Coraline. It didn't have the best reviews on Goodreads, but I just love it. I think something I just really thought was super interesting about the book is because I'm used to reading about books about people in their 20s something or even older, and it was really interesting reading about a bunch of kids. Like, it really felt like Coraline, which I just absolutely love. I love Coraline with my heart, and being able to read a book similar to this universe, like beautiful, stunning. Like, if you don't know what the book is about, which I highly doubt, it's called Imaginary Friend, and the title does give it away slightly. Like, I think the cover and the title matches really well. This book is about this boy named Christopher who is 8 years old. He basically moves to this small town with his mom, and they're very poor, and then like really good things start happening to them, and then Christopher starts hearing voices, and the voice is like, oh, you have to build this treehouse in this Mission Street woods, and he does, and then he opens a portal to a different world. It's good. It's really good. He also ends up getting powers, but those powers come at a price. And that's just the start of the book. There's so many things in this book that I just love. And I really do think all the characters are very well written. It doesn't feel like any of them. Obviously, Christopher is the main character in the story, and there are like his side characters that are like most important. But even like the side characters in the book are also having an important part to the story, and they're also, I just thought every character had an important role to this, and it really added to the story because it wasn't constantly from Christopher's perspective. We'd get it from other characters, so it's written in third party. Sometimes we'd be on a chapter with Christopher and then we'd go on to a different character, maybe his mom or one of his friends or a classmate he went to or a teacher, which really helps break up the story, because if it was just from his perspective, I think I would have gotten so bored with the book. So overall, an amazing book if you like sort of thriller books. Slightly horror is not like that scary. There is definitely some what the hell moments in the book, but it's not like really disturbing or anything. And if you like anything like Coraline, you're probably really gonna like this book. Would I read a book this long again? Absolutely. I think knowing now that I can read an 800-page book has really set me up for the challenge of wanting to read longer books again. But I don't want to necessarily search for longer books just because they are longer. I generally just know now I can read 800 pages, and even though the book took me almost 20 hours to read, which makes sense because I'm not the fastest reader, I have a pretty average reading speed, and the font is pretty average, I think. I will definitely make sure I will be reading longer books again if I see a book interesting me. It will definitely not scare me away of the thickness of the book. I mean, you can tell it's thick. It's thick. Also, it looks like I've abused it, I promise. It's just from reading it for so long. Now, I will say a slight downside to this, honestly, it can be quite a downside, is like it's thick to hold, especially if you're reading in bed. But then again, if you don't want that hassle, you can get it on like a Kindle if you want. But as we all know, I have been a physical copy girl lately. Just do whatever you feel like. Also, something I didn't know. When I googled this, 2 other covers came up, and I am so happy I have this cover because this is definitely the pretty cover out of all of them. So that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, maybe you want to like the video. If you want to comment down below, you can also do that. And you can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of book videos, productivity videos, whatever your heart desires. I generally prefer making videos like that. Please remember to be kind to yourself and others, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!